Welcome back, friends, to another episode of Her Faith at Work. If you're new here, I'm so glad that you joined us. And this is another solo episode this week, and I get to tell you a little story. I get to tell you the story of how this podcast came to be. I've kind of been waiting on the Lord's timing for all of this, and He is saying go. So that's what we're doing this week. We're gonna go. And I'm excited about what he has in store. And I hope that you enjoy listening to the story of how he has been working in my life and in this podcast over the last year, as much as I enjoyed writing it down and looking at the timeline and seeing his hand at work. So let's get after it. Truth time. When's the last time you raised your hands for a swift kick in the pants? Well, I'm the no-nonsense type friend who's going to tell you when you have food in your teeth. So let's get right to it. This is your infusion of sacred and secular, calling you higher into who God created you to be, exploring how intimately faith applies to every part of your life, and how you can live that faith every single day in the marketplace. I felt the tension of separation of church and state. I've been one of the few women at a table of men for decades, and I've stood my ground. Are you ready to do the same? These tools, resources, and interviews are meant to do just that. I'm Jan Touchberry, and it's time to share her faith at work. Well, it's story time. This week, I'm going to endeavor to tell you how this podcast came to be and what the Lord put on my heart many months ago, almost a year ago, actually, to create. And it had been a while since I'd created. Over the last few years, there have been a series of events that have led to me feeling silenced and almost like I was sleepwalking. My creativity had started to dwindle. I felt very small. I felt very inconsequential. That what I did not matter. My working environment was not good. And in many ways, I felt like my voice had been silenced. Just pre 2020, the tide started to turn and I started feeling some validation again that what I brought to the table mattered again, which was super exciting and energizing. But as we all know, 2020 was a literal beatdown. And I think there was some, I don't want to use the word PTS or PTSD out of context, but I think all of us have some post traumatic stress left over from 2020 in a lot of ways. And it was a difficult time for me. My job at the church was deemed essential in the state of Texas, and so I went to work, and a lot of times there were only one or two of us in the building. We were getting services ready for no one because everybody was online, so no one came to the services. It was just weird, and it was, I think, the first time in my life that I can literally pinpoint a visceral feeling of having anxiety. Like, that's not something that I've struggled with a lot in the past. And I think 2020 was the first time that I was able to feel something in my body and realize this is anxiety. That's what I'm feeling. And so struggling through all of that. And then fast forward to 2021, and my mom passed away. I don't know if you've ever experienced the death of somebody that's very close to you, but I really felt for quite some time that I was going through the motions in a fog, not quite myself. My brain wasn't working properly, and I'm sure that's part of the grief process. And it lasted way longer than I thought. And the joy was not there in my life, in creating, in working, in being driven. There was something missing. Fast forward a couple of years, July of last year, 2023, and I had the most vivid dream. And I woke up and it was so vivid that I remember I texted a friend because I needed to tell somebody about it. And all I knew was that in this dream, the Lord told me, it's time to wake up. You've been asleep for long enough. It's time to wake up. And something changed that day. Something changed in my brain. The fog lifted. Now, I would like to say I went out and created. I did not, because I wasn't quite sure what I was supposed to wake up to. And then fast forward another couple of months to October. And as many of you know, I walk on a regular basis in the mornings and I let the Lord dictate my playlists. Usually, what I do is ask Him if He wants me to listen to a sermon or listen to worship music or just be silent with Him. This particular day, He told me to open up YouTube, and the very first ad, it wasn't even a sermon, but the very first ad that popped up was, "You should start a podcast." And then I thumbed up to scroll to the first sermon that popped up because that's usually what I do. And it was all about it's time to wake up. And I knew that that was a confirmation from the Lord. I'd been toying with the idea of starting a podcast for quite a while. I knew that it was probably something that was in my future that He was calling me to, but I wasn't sure when. And this was telling me, okay, it's time. So that was in October of 2023. Then the next month, November 2023, I went to the final retreat of my elite mastermind that I did last year. It was life altering, to say the least. At the very last moment, the retreat planner said that she had been led by the Lord to change the theme, and the new word was awaken. And then I proceeded to spend the next 2.5 or 3 days, and every single speaker seemed to be aligned and speaking right to me. It was awakening my spirit. It was awakening my mind. It was awakening my creativity. It was plugging me into the Lord and what He was stirring inside of me. The word that kept coming up over and over again was podcast. So there was one very specific session that we had. We started in worship, and I remember I was on my knees, and all of a sudden I felt this overwhelming need to get up and sit in my chair and start to write. Out came Her Faith at Work. This is your podcast name. And it's not just going to be a podcast, it's going to be a 501c3. And this 501c3 is going to help fund other nonprofit organizations, because the women who listen to your podcast, whose faith is stirred, they are going to put their faith to work, put their money to work, and fund these ministries that I put before them through your podcast. He gave me a vision that is almost like it's too big for me to speak on the podcast. It just is. It is crazy audacious. It was terrifying. It was exciting. It was, of course, me being me. The first thing that I did was fixated on the podcast name, Her Faith at Work, and did some research and found that no one had a podcast by that name and the URL was available. And so, of course, I grabbed both of those. That was November. I knew that I had to do something. I wasn't quite sure how to do it. And then in December, a friend of mine referred someone else, one of her friends, to me for a possible job, a contract work that she wanted me to do for a website. And I found out that this new friend of mine, she actually held a virtual podcast retreat every year to show people how to start podcasts. And by the end of the virtual retreat, you have a finished pilot and intro, and you're launched and you're good to go. And it started in January. So I swallowed a few deep swallows, and I put my money where my mouth was, and I signed up for her event. And on January 4th, I launched Her Faith at Work with the pilot episode. I can honestly say it was terrifying and exhilarating all at the same time, and I've never been so proud of something at the end of working really hard. It just felt so right. I have thoroughly enjoyed over the last 8 months doing this podcast for you guys every single week. I feel like it's my purpose. So you might be wondering where this 501c3 comes in. That's a great question. I feel like for the last 8 months, I've kind of been biding my time, not quite sure when it was the right time to introduce it, how to introduce it, if the Lord was telling me to introduce it quite yet. But today, in my quiet time, He said, it's time. It's time to tell the women what the vision is that I gave you and what we're going to do together. And by we, I don't just mean me and God. I mean you and me and God. Here's the idea, friends. I believe that the Lord is going to lay nonprofit organizations on my heart, which there are already a few, and they will become guests on my podcast. I will be able to interview them about their mission, their work, their passion, what their ministries are all about, who they serve, why they serve them, and how we can get involved. Whether you own your own business, you're an entrepreneur, you have a full-time job, or you are a stay-at-home mama, you have something that you can contribute to this. I believe that God is calling us as a Her Faith at Work community to contribute to this and to make a difference. And I believe that in the coming year, we are going to see a lot of zeros behind the amount that we have collectively been able to sow into these ministries that God places on our heart. And we're getting ready to start in just a couple of weeks with our first ministry. I'm so excited to roll that out to you. This interview is going to be fire. I'm so excited about that. So we are going to have all of the instructions that you're going to need to know about how that you can contribute to each and every one of these ministries, if that is the way that the Lord is guiding you, or maybe there's one or two that stand out to you. But here's what I want you to know today. I believe that God is calling women, us, our community, Her Faith at Work, to unite, to use our influence and our means, our monetary means, to make a difference in the world. And so here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to pray to see if the Lord is going to ask you to be part of this movement. I believe it's really going to be a movement. I'm going to ask you in your prayer to see if He might have you set aside a certain amount of money every month, every quarter, every year. It's all tax deductible because it's going to be a donation to a nonprofit organization. And what business couldn't, use a little tax deduction every once in a while? But I believe that the Lord will prosper what He sets our hands to. And I just think that when we look back a year from now, we are all going to be so incredibly amazed by what the Lord does as we sow our seeds into these ministries that He puts into the Her Faith at Work community. I hope that this makes sense to you. I hope that you're excited about it. I hope that you're looking forward to what's to come as much as I am. And get ready, because the Lord is going to do a mighty work. And I have a feeling that He's going to use you and I to do it. See you next time. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Her Faith at Work. If the Lord put someone on your heart that you think needs to hear this message today, will you just smash that share button? And if you haven't already followed the show, I would love for you to do that. Super extra points if you hop over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. That helps the algorithm pick us up and drop us right in the AirPods of people that need to hear what the Lord is saying to them today. I hope you'll come back for the next episode of Her Faith at Work. The podcast comes out every Wednesday. And if you look down in the show notes, I've even got a couple of free downloads for you that I think you will really enjoy. With that, have a great week. See you next time.